Welcome to WhoDooTV. I'm Hoosier. And today, Dean Haspel spends some time with us to talk about the Red Hook and the Image Expo 2018 press coverage.
You are now watching WhoDooTV.
Image is going to be publishing a graphic novel collection of a webcomic that I did for Line Webtoons in 2016, and then I won the Ringo Award for Best Webcomic in 2017. And I knew that I was going to have the print rights soon and other merchandising opportunities, and so I was thinking about, well, who's the right publisher? Because we live in a world of Patreon and Kickstarter and everything else, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to be 51 in May, But I also love Image Comics, I mean, there's Marvel and DC, which I grew up with, and then Image over the years has become phenomenal with a lot of their properties, and so I was really excited by that and the opportunity, and I wrote Eric Stevenson, and within 10 minutes he was like, let's do this. So I was like, I feel special. And so the Red Hook is about a super thief who is bequeathed the Omni-fist of Altruism and is forced to become a superhero against his will or he will die during a time when Brooklyn reveals herself to be sentient and is heartbroken by the apathy and indifference of America, of the world, So what she does is she literally and physically secedes from New York, ergo America, to start her own republic. And at that point, because of that secession, there's like this cosmic thing that kind of happens, and it launches like a whole bunch of superheroes. And I grew up, reading Jack Kirby comics and whatnot. So I said on the panel like that stylistically, the comic is kind of like a creative orgy between Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, Will Eisner. I would even throw in C.C. Beck, who did Shazam back in the day. So it's got like a Silver Age homage in some ways, but with modern sensibilities. And so that's going to be collected. And then I did that at Line Webtoon as 26 chapters, weekly chapters for free on this app. And like so the book's going to be collecting that first season. And it's going to be called The Red Hook Vol.1 New Brooklyn. And the Red Hook is basically the anchor for hopefully several volumes. I'm already working on Volume 2. It's called War Cry. And that's another Red Hook comic. And that's what I'm currently doing at Line Webtoon. So it's like there's a synergy happening between digital webcomics and print. And I think there was a misnomer or this idea that if it's out for free and on the web, no one's going to buy it, and that's a total lie. I've been doing webcomics since 2006 when I co-founded and launched a webcomics collective called Activate, and that did really well. And I did Billy Dogma comics there, and a whole bunch of other artists did their comics, and those would turn into print items. I did something called Trip City where I did a bunch of comics. I've worked digitally for many years. In fact, the last few years, I've mostly just been working in digital, so it's like when I go to shows or Comic-Cons, I kind of have nothing to sell unless I created a poster or something. So it's going to be really cool to finally have come June this 168-page book, because it's not only going to comprise the first season of the Red Hook from Line Webtoon, but it's going to have a 24-page story that I published in Dark Horse Presents. It's going to have the original first story I ever did of the Red Hook, and hopefully like a cool intro by someone and maybe even an afterword, and that'll be 168 pages. And then maybe it'll be an annual affair. That's the idea for now. And while I take on other work possibly, or we'll see. It's part of this new Brooklyn universe that I've created. And I know right now it's like silly to try to even compete with a Marvel universe or DC universe, but I'm not competing. It's very indie in a lot of ways, and it deals with concerns of gentrification and I always think that when you put your art out there, hopefully it comes back in some way. Like I always felt Jack Kirby was very prescient in a lot of the stuff that he created, and so with that in mind, I'm trying to think in those terms. So like in New Brooklyn, they don't really use American money anymore, but there's a lot of artists and a lot of displaced artists. And so part of the bartering system is to have artists that can trade their art for food and services. And it to me, that creates that discussion, and in a way, I've done that. I remember going to the dentist and I didn't have money, but he knew I was a cartoonist, and he asked me to do like a drawing of him as a superhero. And I did that, and it was like a $500 trade, which was great, So it does happen, and so anyway, I was thinking in those terms, and I just think that and that's where and it's also got the trappings of superhero genre on top of it, It's also a romance comic, and because you got to have romance in your comics. That's actually the key to all good stories, is a romance. So.
Is there a challenge that you have doing, I don't want to call it script work, but trying to bring a story together visually to tell it better than a collected work?
All right, so right now, I don't know if you're familiar with Line Webtoon, the app, but it's a vertical scroll where literally, if you somebody explained it really easily, you take a roll of toilet paper, it could just be a whole bunch of panels, right? Until you end that chapter, let's say. And so some of the panels are longer than others. So the way I was drawing comics for many years, and we'll get back to it at some point, or whenever I work in print only, the real estate of the blank page, you can do anything with, as long as you're serving the story, right? But you can have someone jumping into a panel, you have insets or whatever, right? You kind of can't do that on the vertical scroll, because it's really just one panel after another, and also the reveals are at the bottom of the panel usually, right? Because you're pulling with just your thumb, this one long JPEG, as it were, right? So as an artist, it hasn't done that a lot. I've worked in webcomics, but still using some of the traditional methods, so it's an easy kind of adaptation back into print, right? This is a little harder, so what I do, and I figured it out because I did a lot of testing with page designs, is I am drawing it as the print comic first, all right? But abandoning insets, wide shots, all that stuff. And then a splash page is actually one panel on your phone. But it's trying to find those moments and pace it accordingly and dramatically. So I draw it and prepare it first for print, for eventual print, let's say. Then I cut those panels up and I create that vertical scroll. So I don't really have a problem with it. Like, yes, could I have more fun with the design of the page because of how I'm used to doing that? Sure. But it's still just conveying story at the end of the day, So I'm okay with it,
Sounds like when you're describing the character in the world, like there's a lot of passion I can tell coming from you. Does Red Hook share some of your sensibilities with regards to your worldview?
Probably. You think, I think all the characters in some way do. In fact, in this Warcry, the sequel to what I'm working on right now, I've had to, a good villain isn't just totally an evil asshole. They have to be complex. In some ways, they're often more interesting than the hero because they're thinking a little different or in a way that's controversial, let's say. So I get to put some of my more controversial ideas into the mouths of the villains, because we're complex people and we're angry and we have, maybe different feelings and different ideas about stuff. So, and actually in this case, if you think about it, the Red Hook is starting off as kind of a bad guy because he's a super thief who's forced to be a superhero, right? In a way, the way I described it was instead of breaking bad, it's like breaking good. It's like the reverse engineering that kind of thematic quality. So, a lot of people, I just find those to be much more interesting. I don't know, I know a lot of people who are innately good, and don't need to be taught empathy, which I think our world is starting to realize you need to teach empathy a little more. But that's not what's wrong with this guy. I think it's like we also live in a time where everyone's becoming selfish and trying to figure out how their way through a world. And then you forget to be communal or care about others, and then because you're trying to find your own way. So I'm navigating those spaces, because to me, a knight in shining armor is the most boring character to write. What is that? I don't even know who that is. And we have our faults. So I try to discuss that, and then there's romance around that, and then I think one of the hardest things to do is to make you care about a character, and I'm always trying to strive to make you care about these characters. And with that in mind, it means putting yourself in there, being authentic, revealing yourself and being vulnerable. And because I've worked in memoir a lot, maybe little kind of inklings of memoirs getting in that, because it feels like now that you've talked to me for a few minutes, if you read the comic, you're going to hear the comic the way I talk. and and maybe something some kind of chemistry we've just had together, will leak through the page in that way, or so.
With the Red Hook, he's forced to be a good guy, even though he's a bad guy. Is there a guiding light to say is there? Because I picture the bad guy. He doesn't want to be a good guy. He wants to be a thief. He wants to get paid. Is there a guiding light? Is it Brooklyn, the sentient being that forces him to do that? How is
so because there's this demigod, the Green Point from Greenpoint, a Brooklyn area, is dying, and he has like a few minutes to pass on his altruism, and it just happens to be this jerk off, this thief, and he's even like, what the hell, you're the one I'm gonna like. It has no time, and so he literally realizes, well, I can't just pass you the altruism because you might not use it and you might abuse it. So he literally punches him in the chest, grabs his heart, cuts off his hand, is able to seal it all up. He's a cosmic god, he can do these things, right? And as he's dying, he's like, you have to be good for goodness sake. He's basically made like a Santa Claus superhero out of this guy. So, and of course, he's confused, our protagonist, and we might be confused. It isn't until you show how it works. So he might be walking past, and I show this in the first story, he's walking past a jewelry heist. And usually he just keep going and let, one of his rivals, okay, fine, he doesn't squabble. And then he realizes he can't walk past it because the hand is starting to squeeze his heart and kill him. So it's making him have to return back to, oh my God, what am I doing here? And I gotta go stop this? I wouldn't normally do this. And it also puts him in other positions of putting himself in danger, right? And of course it comes with this awesome sword that he can pull out of his chest, because that's our hero, the Green Point, has this awesome sword. So when I was working on the second story, which is called War Cry, it does address, I don't want to get too much into it because it hasn't ended yet, but it does address, like, does he start to get used to the idea of being a hero so he doesn't feel the pain, and it starts to train him to be a better person? And then ultimately, what would happen if that was stripped from him? Would he still be good?
Yeah, that was my follow-up. I wondered,
would he do good?
If he learns the empathy, does he finally reach out and embrace the empathy of doing good and finding where he can do good versus stumbling?
That's right. So there's this journey, right, with this character, and if I get to do the third story, which I hopefully will know in a month if I get to do for this trilogy, then it goes exponential what happens next. So there's Brooklyn, and then it expands out to the world, and it becomes this, and it's also a tragic love story because of that. So again, I don't want to give away too much, and hopefully you care,
I kind of get a greatest American hero kind of vibe.
Sure, there's a little bit of that, I mean, yeah, and it's goofy, it's absurd, again, going back to the Jack Kirby stuff, like, he's one of the guys that could pull off such silly things and make it mean something, and so I love that stuff, and that's how I respond to it, and hopefully that's what I'm imparting in the work, so.
Thanks for watching, and thanks, Dean, for spending some time with us. We also want to ask that you subscribe to us at WhoDooTV. Also follow us on Twitter at WhoDooTV. Thanks to our friends over at Outright Geekery. For all things geeky, check them out.